Hey guys, Max92 and welcome back to another tryout. Today's tryout is on Hi-Fi Rush. This game shadow dropped after that recent Xbox Developer Direct, I think is what they called it. It just happened to be the day that I was recording, doing my pre-production for tryouts for this episode. And so I was like, I can adjust my schedule around and put this game in because it dropped into Game Pass. I have Game Pass. I can just hook my Xbox up and record it, and we'll do the episode on this instead of whatever I had scheduled. We'll push that stuff to next week. And we'll do this now while it's super relevant. By the time the video comes out, it's been out for like a week, so I don't know how on top of everything I am anymore, but we're gonna talk about it anyway. So Hi-Fi Rush is a high-energy rock and roll hack and slash, and to put into comparative terms, I like to say it's Sunset Overdrive cross Jet Set Radio cross Devil May Cry cross Crypt of the Necrodancer. The first two is like where I think it sits aesthetically and maybe a little bit narratively, and then the second two is where it sits more in terms of gameplay. I played far enough to beat the first boss, which took me like a little under an hour and 15 minutes. I was taking my time and like screwing around and looking around and all this stuff, so I imagine you could finish that first level in a lot less time, but like I was just sort of taking time to try and learn things, learn how the game works, and so it took me a bit longer than I feel like most people will probably take to get through the level, because I was, like I said, looking around. I stopped to get some like vistas and stuff like that. So it took me a little under an hour and 15 minutes to get through the first level and beat the first boss, and then, get into like your safe area hub type thing where you can do your upgrades and change your costumes and stuff. I got that far and then I stopped because I try to keep this show to a first impression of like the first hour or 2 hours or so for the most part. So something that's actually really refreshing about this game is that it's not open world. As much as I enjoy open world games, when you have one thing all the time, you're gonna get tired of it. And because of how big industry works, they see a trend, everyone capitalizes on the trend, and then the market gets oversaturated and everyone on the customer side starts to hate that trend. But we're at that point with open world games where it's oversaturated to the point where people are starting to burn out on the concept. And another thing that makes this really refreshing is that it's highly stylized visually. It's got a really nice art style, it's really high quality, and like it's not just, a style of realism. I feel like a lot of games are just doing like, a style of realism, because it's kind of easier at this point than creating your own like visual shading systems and stuff to slap on top of your models to make them look and pop the way that games like this would have to do. That's just an extra step that costs more money, and therefore companies are less likely to actually invest the time and money into doing. And so you have this game that has like these two things that have sort of died out due to trends pushing companies to make one thing, these certain things that were popular at a point 4 or 5 years ago, were pretty popular, but they've continued to push these things out to where like the customers are starting to get burned out on them. And you also have something that has a visual style that is less typical nowadays, because it's just less workload, as far as I can tell, to just, go into your Unreal and use Unreal's like hyper-realistic graphics stuff to make realistic looking worlds and then don't think any further about it. This game is like really fun. How it works is the game tutorializes a lot in the beginning part, because I feel like it's something that seems so simple, especially if you're a musician, but not everyone has a great sense of rhythm, and even if you're a musician, you might like take some time to like think about it, because it's very simplistic rhythm. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, and so like you might get like, you might try to get fancy with it, but you can't really get too fancy with it. You've got to hit on the beat, actually. So, it does a lot of tutorializing just like hit on the beat to do things better. That's fine, especially since it was the first mission. I've not played any further than that. I assume it stops tutorializing so heavily once you get out of there. But once you sort of sit down and you get in the feel of that and how everything moves with the music and the environment and all that, like, it really clicks really well and feels really fun to play. And if you're not so good, even after spending time sitting there and like trying to get the timings down, seems like in the settings there's a lot of assists to help visualize the timings as well. The tutorializing, I think, also feeds into that. You get a lot of help if like it's something you're not clicking with immediately, and there's a lot of time to play with it and, you know, check it against like the stuff that they have in the options to help you. It's really trying to be like, yeah, we're a rhythm action game, but, you know, we want people to be able to play it even if they're not so good at the rhythm part. All the rhythm part does is help. It makes you hit harder, it makes you jump higher, it makes you be able to dash concurrently a handful of times, but you can still get through the game if you're bad at the rhythm, most likely. You just, you know, aren't going to be doing stuff that's particularly flashy, and, you know, that's fine. You'll get through it. And, you know, stuff will hit on the beat regardless. All of, like, the animations in the game are tied to the beat of the music. So, even if you press the button to swing off beat, the swing will happen on the beat of the music regardless. There's a part of me that hopes that this is big enough and popular enough that it inspires in the games industry what Spider-Verse inspired in the animation industry to an extent. Like, I feel like the film and television industry are resistant to that because that kind of highly stylized, really amazing animation is expensive. But there was a lot of people who were inspired by that movie and how it did this, like, very animation-centric thing that you can really only do in animation, and did it in a huge budget way. And while this I don't think is like the biggest budget game, I'd say this probably falls in AA rather than AAA, I still think that like this could be big enough to where it inspires a similar thing in the games industry, which also would be even better because I feel like the games industry is a lot more receptive to those sort of like cultural changes and inspirations, since like there's a lot less ancient money in the games industry as there is in film and television, where it's a lot less of a conservative industry. Like, it's not as afraid of change as the film and television industry tends to be. There's a lot in film and TV that just tends to be like very like, we're gonna do what we know and we're not gonna change from it unless someone else proves us to the first that can be successful. That's not as much of an issue in the games industry. It's becoming an issue in the games industry, and I hope something like this being successful, something that just appeared out of thin air. It's only $30, so it's half the typical price of the big games. The typical price is going up to like $70, so like even less than half of the price of the big games, and is self-contained, highly visually stylized. These AA games have sort of disappeared from the industry since the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 2 eras, where they were super common in those, like, the 6th and 7th generation of consoles or whatever. And since they've sort of gone away and been replaced by this big divide where you have the AAA and the indie, it's good to see that in some cases those AA experiences are sort of coming back to be a middle ground, where you get some of the more access to resources that the AAA has, and you also get the artisticness of the indie scene that has been growing and growing over the last 10, 15 years or so. And it's funny to have brought up Spider-Verse, because Chai actually kind of reminds me of a Peter Parker. He has that sort of vibe, you know, that look and vibe of a Spider-Man to an extent. But that's off topic. I have one negative-ish thing, and that was in the boss fight that I made it to. There are some sections where, because of how the animations and attack patterns and stuff are tied to music, there were some sections where the boss sort of went into the like neutral stage, and that was just sort of there for a little bit, waiting for the music to come around to the point where it does its specific attack. And in some ways that helps because you can really, like, it was before a specific attack, I think, from what I can remember. So you can sort of like memorize that in the attack patterns, but it's also just sort of weird how it just sort of goes back and just sits there and it's like waiting. It's probably not that long in the grand scheme of things, but it's just sort of weird that it's just sat there. But that's not like the biggest issue. That's just sort of a consequence of how the system works. Anyway, that's all my notes. I think the game's really cool. I think that I want to play it again. It's been like 2 days or something since I played it. I want to play it again, but I've been waiting so I don't play too much of it, so that I can make this video first, record this video first, and stuff. So I'll probably be playing that over the weekend because I record these on Fridays. I'll probably be playing that in the upcoming days, and I might even finish it before the video comes out because I don't think it's that long of a game. But yeah, check it out. Passes its tryout. Check out Hi-Fi Rush. That's what I have to say about it. So go in the description, find a beacons.ai link. It'll take you to my Patreon, Bandcamp, Redbubble, etc. Go to that link, click on the things, do what you do in those places. Like the video if you liked it, dislike if you didn't. Subscribe and keep up with this and other shows. Leave a comment. What do you think about Hi-Fi Rush? What do you think about Tango Gameworks going from Ghostwire Tokyo to this? Leave a comment. Share the video. Do the things. Anyway, thanks for watching. And I'll see you next time. Bye!